Episode number 94 of the Wholesome Fertility Podcast. Welcome to the Wholesome Fertility Podcast. I'm Michelle, a fertility acupuncturist here to provide you with resources on how to create a wholesome approach to your fertility journey. My guest today is Jessica Ortner. Jessica is a stress reduction expert and one of the leading voices teaching EFT Tapping, a revolutionary self-soothing technique that combines ancient Chinese acupressure and modern psychology. Tapping has been proven to help reduce cortisol levels, which is the stress hormone, making tapping a powerful and easy tool to manage stress in our daily lives. She is a producer of the Tapping Solution, the breakthrough documentary film on EFT Meridian Tapping. She is also the New York Times best-selling author of The Tapping Solution for Weight Loss and Body Confidence, a book based on her online program which has helped more than 11,000 women tackle the stress that leads to weight gain. Jessica is also the host of the Tapping World Summit, an annual online event that has attracted over 1 million attendees from around the world. In 2018, along with her brothers Nick and Alex, she launched the Tapping Solution app to make this stress relief technique accessible to anyone in the world. With over 200 tapping meditations to choose from, there is something for everyone. The app has had over 1.6 million completed tapping sessions, with over 200,000 people having used her releasing anxiety tapping meditation, showing an average of 41% decrease of anxiety in just 9 minutes. So welcome to the podcast, Jessica.
Thank you, Michelle. Thanks for having me.
I'm so happy to have you. We've been trying to get this going for a while, and I'm really excited. You allowed me, first of all, to see your app, which I love. We're going to get to that in a little bit. So I wanted first to start with you sharing your journey, how you learned about EFT tapping, what it is, so that people listening can hear about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up with a mom who's a therapist, and I always grew up, she was a school therapist in an underprivileged school. And I always grew up wanting to be of service. And so when I was really young and I was trying to think about what I wanted to do, I was looking at all of these different options and realizing that there are so many more discoveries when it comes to how the brain works, how our emotions work, how our body work, that take a really long time to go mainstream or to get into a textbook.
Right.
And so I have always been incredibly curious about just innovation when it comes to wellness. And one day I was really sick, and my brother came to me. I have two older brothers. My oldest brother, Nick, came to me and he goes, I heard you've had this cold for 2 weeks and you just can't beat it. I heard about this stress relief technique that's supposed to really help your body. You want to give it a try? So I was like, yeah, sure. So I started to tap on these acupressure points, and he is my older brother. So at one point I'm tapping on the top of my head and I'm looking at him like, are you trying to see how ridiculous I'll look? And he was like, no, just keep going. And I began to talk about how sick I felt and how frustrated that just my body wasn't recovering. And as I began to tap on these acupressure points and give a voice to how I felt my body relax, but I also gained some clarity. And I looked at him and I said, I don't want to get better. And he's like, what do you mean you don't want to get better? And it wasn't that I consciously chose to get sick, but in that moment I realized that I'd been feeling really lost in my life. I had a passion, but I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I felt like I was working hard to all the podcasts and the lectures, and nothing was really going my way. And I realized that being sick was just this break from the pressure I had to constantly try and go and go. And so then I switched and I began to tap and focus on how disappointed I felt and how heartbroken I felt, and that feeling of just the tears of frustration when you feel like you're doing everything right, but you're not getting the results that you want and you don't have clarity as to why it's not working. And there was something really powerful about giving a voice to my frustration where I finally felt this shift, and it wasn't just mental, it was physical. I could breathe deeper. My sinuses cleared up. I remember looking at him and being like, this is incredible. I feel great. And again, this weight off of my chest. And so often when we're under chronic stress and all of this anxiety, we don't even realize how much it's impacting us because we've gotten used to it.
Yeah.
And it's not until a moment of relief when we go, oh my goodness, I cannot believe the weight I've been carrying on my chest for the past year, for the past few years, whatever it is. And so I had this real breakthrough, but it wasn't a moment where I said, aha, this is it. This is my destiny. I just got busy with life again. And down the line, I was going through a breakup and I didn't remember all of the points. I remembered like half the tapping points, and I was in bed crying, and I started to tap on these points while I gave a voice to my heartbreak. And again, I felt relief. And then I had this moment of like, wow, I'm not even doing this perfectly. I remember half of this, and I'm feeling so much better. And then from that moment, I teamed up with my brother. We had no film experience. We put money on credit cards and we made a documentary film about this technique, tapping. And it's been amazing. I've been doing this for 12 years. And I will say in the last 5 years, the research is catching up. Like now there's been clinical trials that show that tapping reduces cortisol, the stress hormone.
That's amazing.
There is research showing that the brain changes. What lights up in the brain changes when you do the tapping. And so it's been an incredible journey. And I feel like we're in this place where it's going mainstream. And even, you know, the head of pediatrics in Columbia University is one of our biggest fans. And she has everybody in her department in Columbia University tapping. So it's gone
That's
from
amazing. I love it.
It's amazing. It's what like this small thing that my brother taught me that was kind of weird at the time, to now really expanding and getting just more attention and clinical trials. And so it's been exciting, and I'm excited for platforms like this where I get to share it.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love the fact, there's so many different things that I love about this. I love the fact that, first of all, you went with your intuition and how you felt. And that's really ultimately the most important thing, because sometimes we rely so much on studies, but when it does come, it's awesome. It's awesome to see that what you knew in your gut to be true is actually being validated.
I think we have to remember that studies come from money. So it's easy for a drug to get funded when it's a huge pharmaceutical company. When you have techniques that you teach and things like tapping, this is something that is so easy to learn that it's not big business.
Right.
One of the reasons that tapping is getting attention now is unfortunately because of the opioid crisis, there is more government funding to look at things that can help with pain management and with stress. You know, the World Health Organization is calling stress the health epidemic of the 21st century.
Yeah.
And so now these things are starting to get more funding. But to your point, we have to remember that if we have people talking about it, and if you give yourself the experience and you feel a difference, that should be all that we need. Because a lot of times the things that we're teaching, and I know the things that you talk about, it takes a little while to get the research because it's not big business, but it's transformational.
Correct. Absolutely. And another thing that you said that I find so fascinating and so on point was the fact that you realized when you were sick and doing the tapping that you didn't want to get better. And I think that that happens subconsciously to so many of us. We get comfortable in our like pseudo home of like whatever state it is that we choose. And habit is super powerful. And like we get really comfortable in not changing or not challenging our thought patterns. So I thought that that was a really insightful thing. And I thought that it was so true. It's like such an important point.
I think another aspect of that as well is sometimes we get comfortable and then, or we go to another extreme, which is we get really hard on ourselves and we try to control the entire universe, right? Like we try to feel like if I work hard enough, things are going to happen.
Yeah.
And there's something about tapping, a big element of it is giving yourself permission, giving yourself a voice to how you're feeling and accepting it. And part of acceptance is surrendering. And when I struggled, and we can talk about this more, but when I struggled to get pregnant, it's hard because part of me felt like if I just work hard enough, it should happen. But then there's also another element of letting go. There's another element of timing. There's a divinity behind it. And for me to find peace in my journey, I had to recognize what I could control and do those things, and recognize what I couldn't control and find the moments of peace.
Right.
Because stressing and waiting and trying to control things I can't control was, again, just creating more anxiety and really impacting my body in a harmful way. So life is this balance of knowing what you can do and being proactive, and knowing the moments when you just have to relax and let go and trust.
Absolutely. It's the serenity prayer. I love that prayer because it's so true. And one of the things that I teach, I actually not only teach, I practice, is really the practice of Wu Wei, which is based in Taoism, and it's effortless effort. That's how all of nature functions optimally, because
Being the
every
egg, receiving.
exactly. And you're still acting. I mean, the egg does a lot. It has a ton of mitochondria because it needs a ton of energy. So it does a ton, but yet it allows at the same time. So we're all programmed to do what we need to do, but in an effortless way. So
Mhm.
I thought, you know, the whole idea of like the birds being flown, they're not flying, but they're being flown. Part of it's the surrender. The fact that they're able to fly so high is surrendering to the wind. So it is such a beautiful thing to really know the difference and find that balance. And I'm sure
And
that
it's hard though.
tapping can help.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's hard to find
It
that
is.
balance. And
It is.
for me, like I have, since I was little, have been a chronic overthinker. Like
Mhm.
I try to solve problems that don't
Most
even
of
exist.
us.
Yeah.
Most of us.
Like, and I'm thinking like, how do I fix this? How do I control this? And tapping was the first experience where I was like, how do I just accept how I feel? How do I look at my personal development, not from a place of I need to fix myself, but how can I accept all of these aspects and the fact that I am emotional and I am sensitive and I have bad days.
Yeah.
And the moment there's that acceptance, we have that flow, that effortlessness, because we're not fighting. We have these expectations that we just need to be happy all the time, or if we don't do everything perfectly, then we're not going to get pregnant. If we don't speak perfectly and think perfectly, and all that pressure can
Mhm.
be really difficult. And there's something about tapping that gives yourself permission to feel and accept, so you can go into that space of more ease.
Yes, I love it. So for people who are hearing this for the first time, like they're thinking, what is tapping? What does it really mean?
Yeah.
Can you explain what it is and how it works?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's called tapping. It's also known as emotional freedom technique, or EFT. The short term is tapping because you're literally tapping on these acupressure points on your body. These are acupressure points that sometimes we use when we're stressed. Sometimes people go like this.
Hmm.
They put their hand on their chest. I mean, we intuitively know these points help us relax. And what we're doing with tapping, like I mentioned, we're actually focusing on the negative. So this isn't just about being positive and thinking happy thoughts. It's giving yourself space to honor how you feel. Because when you have a thought, when you're feeling stressed, what's happening is the thought might start in your brain, but it begins to impact your whole body. And
Right.
we often go into what's called this fight or flight response. So there's a part of your brain called the amygdala, and that's like the fire alarm. And that's saying like something's not safe, something's wrong. And so suddenly you have an overproduction of cortisol, which is the stress hormone. You have adrenaline, your heart starts to beat. And when we have that chronic stress again and again, it impacts our digestion, it impacts fertility. I mean, you have to think this all comes from this reaction has saved our ancestors' lives, and it can
Right.
save our lives. If you
Yeah.
are on a hike in the woods and you see a snake, you bet want to have that response. I mean, that fight or flight response is incredibly helpful in those situations. The problem now is we look at that pregnancy test and we get that, or we see the news and suddenly we get that reaction. And even though we're home and we can think to ourselves right now and right here, I'm safe, I don't have a threat, we have the anxiety. Our body doesn't know that we're safe. And so what you're doing with the tapping is you're getting clear on that thought that's making your body feel that tension, that stress.
Right.
And as you think of that thought, you begin to stimulate these acupressure points. And that begins to calm your body, and it sends this calming signal to the brain. So you get to the point where you can think the negative thought, but you can feel relaxed in your body. And
Mm-hmm.
when you can think a negative thought, when you can just face the reality of whatever you're facing, but you feel relaxed in your body,
Mm.
now you can be creative, you can be resourceful, you can be logical, you can access your prefrontal cortex, which is that logical part of your brain. I mean, all of us have had the experience, I think all of us, at least I have, of being upset and writing a text or writing an email and then looking back and thinking that was so dumb. I
Yeah.
mean, we are dumb when we're mad, and we're
Right.
dumb when we're
It's
frustrated.
true. I don't
Yeah,
hear anybody saying that they don't regret things that they say in that state. They
in that
always do. It's
you
always
always you
when
always
you come
do.
back.
Totally. And so when we're navigating a difficult situation, whether it be fertility or finances or a relationship, this is when we have to look at the stressful thought, because when we can calm our body, we can navigate it better. People look at our app and they think, I don't get how one thing works for so many things, because we have a section on going through IVF treatment. We have a section on money and relationships. And the reason it works for so many things is because tapping works on stress. It works on the
Right.
stress response.
Right.
And we have the stress response when it comes to basically every aspect of our lives. So
Right.
one of my passions is weight loss and body confidence. It is looking at that topic, not from a place of diet and exercise, but what's the stress that
Mm-hmm.
is bringing you to food as your only way to have a break? What's the stress that's upping your cortisol level, which is directly linked to abdominal fat? So
Yeah.
when it comes to stress, it does impact every aspect of our lives, but also our body in such a massive way
It
that not
does. Yeah.
only by tapping, you're not only physically helping your body, but you're also helping your mind as you begin to find other resources. Because, anyone who's had a struggle in their lives, it's rarely one magic pill, right?
Right.
It's usually like something that gets you released, but then you discover some other things. And like life is more complex than this like one thing. And that's what I like about tapping, is that you can have your personal breakthrough, but it can also put you in the state of mind where you can find other things to support yourself as you're going through whatever you're going through.
Absolutely. And another thing that I just want to point out, like, because we're talking about stress and we're talking about emotions, is that all of these things, all these emotions get stored in our bodies. I
Yeah.
mean, like you were saying, that's where you start to feel it. And then you come to a place where you're actually able to relax your body and feel it. But your mind and your thoughts can actually impact your physiology. And that can affect your fertility, your reproductive health, like really anything.
Yeah, it's true. And when it comes to tapping, you physically feel it. I mean, I think the wonderful thing for me personally about tapping is it opened me up to check in with my body and say like, well, okay, I'm angry. Where do I feel this anger?
Right.
And if you're angry or frustrated, I've never worked with a client where I've said, where in your body do you feel angry? And they've said their brain. It's
Hmm.
usually their stomach, their
Right.
chest, sometimes their
Absolutely.
throat.
Yeah.
And then as we begin to tap, we realize, oh, you feel anger in your throat. You don't feel like you can speak up.
Yeah.
You don't feel like you have a voice.
Hmm.
Or, you're holding it in your stomach and you feel like you haven't been following your gut feelings. I mean, this is when, to me, I'm always surprised. Like we talked before about the research, and obviously
Yep.
that's important. This is something that I'm just seeing, like I don't know why when we feel like we can't speak up, we get a sore throat often. Not all the time, but
Yeah.
a lot of times our body is a metaphor for whatever we're emotionally feeling in our lives.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Have
I see
seen
it
it
all the
again and
time.
again.
I see it in my
Yeah,
office all the time. People
yeah.
who are nervous and have real bad gut issues. I mean, this is, time and time again of this chronic assault, really, of how you're embodying your emotions really affects the energy and the stagnation and the flow. And a lot of people who haven't spoken, I've seen them with thyroid issues. It's crazy all
It
across
is,
the
yeah,
board.
yeah. We have, there is an incredible book called Heal Your Life from Louise Hay. I'm sure you know of it. It was kind of, Louise Hay came out in the 70s during the AIDS epidemic, working with gay men around self-love and acceptance. I mean, talk about just one of the most revolutionary women. And
Oh,
she since,
totally. Mhm.
yeah, she since has passed away. but we were able to she was a fan of tapping. And so we got permission from her publisher to use her book as a resource in the app. And so we look at her book and it will say something like colds are related to, and she'll say something emotional. And so in these tapping meditations, we're kind of exploring that, knowing that it's not always exactly that same way. Just because you have tension in your throat doesn't mean 100% that you don't feel like you can speak up in your life. I mean,
Right.
we're so complex, and our bodies interpret things
Exactly.
differently.
Yeah.
There are patterns, right? And you've seen them in your own office. These are big patterns. And so within this, it'll be like a thyroid problem, and we'll be tapping on the emotional aspect. And we just get people writing in all the time going, I didn't even think about that, but my thyroid problem started when I was going through a divorce, when I felt like I couldn't speak up. Like, people begin, when they start this, to make those connections with themselves of when these things started. And just having that awareness brings healing to that. And I've just seen incredible breakthroughs.
Yeah, I mean, I see this in so many different things. I've seen it in the, past life regression with Dr. Weiss. I mean, there's so many things like that where when you give something a voice, it really comes down to validation, which
Yes.
is we spoke about miscarriages. And one of the difficulties with that is that there's no true like listening from the community. There's no real voice to it because you feel like you're going through it alone. It's not something that
Yeah.
has ceremony. And that's one of the most difficult parts, is that you're not able to express it in a way with the community support, unless that is that you've met other people going through the same thing, which I find to be so healing. And so it's important to give things a voice. I really do
Yeah.
believe that.
I felt the same way. So I had two miscarriages. One was really quick. I had found out I was pregnant, and a week later I had a miscarriage. And that first miscarriage, I remember crying so much, and then also having a moment of feeling embarrassed for crying so much, because I thought to myself, well, I wasn't far along. I only knew I was pregnant for a week. And so that's what we do. We kind of talk our way out of these feelings. Like, I shouldn't be so upset because people have it worse. But then you're not honoring the fact that, no, your heart is broken. Like, this is
Yeah.
painful. This hurts. And so, that's where my thought process started. And I caught myself, and I was like, what I teach is acceptance, is giving yourself time to mourn and to create that space. And so I allowed myself to do that, and I began to use tapping. And I created a tapping meditation in the app, in the Tapping Solution app, for miscarriages, for that exact same reason, that there was nothing there. I couldn't find anything for me. And like you said, no one tells you how to mourn. Most people don't even know what's going on because you didn't even tell anybody yet. And then, the second miscarriage I had was further along. I was nearing the end of my first trimester, and I had to have two medical procedures. It was a missed miscarriage, and the first procedure didn't work. The second procedure worked, but then I had a blood clot.
Oh my
And
God.
it just was so hard on my body. And the thing about, like, miscarriages and just fertility in general is that the hormonal ups and downs are
Right.
just so intense. And we need techniques like this, because it's not, we also need the knowledge. Like, we need to speak to people to like you, to understand, like, what is really going on, because that way we know, what, this isn't a moment to reevaluate my life decisions. Like, when I'm this hormonally feel hormonally broken, this isn't the moment to reflect on your life. It's not. And, like, so I, knowing that, had to really tell myself, don't believe what you think. Like, in this time, through the struggle, like, it's not about believing your thoughts. It's about trying to not think and get back into your body and find some peace in the moment. Because when you're feeling those hormonal ups and downs, your brain isn't functioning correctly. And to me, there was something freeing about knowing that. And
Yes.
I had at the same time that I was having my miscarriages, I had my two best friends going through something similar. Like, we were all going through miscarriages together. It was crazy. And we were a little bit apart. And so what was helpful about about kind of being around the same time, but not at the same time, is that we were able to remind each other, just a reminder, don't believe what you think.
Yeah.
Like, honor your emotions, but don't try to analyze your life.
You can't, not from that state of mind. If you're going through that, and also you're right. I mean, knowing that the hormones are affecting your emotions and your thinking abilities, and they do. And luckily, a lot of my patients realize that when they're going through, they're like, I'm emotional, but I know it's because of the
Yeah.
estrogen. And so, but it really is something that you almost have to remind yourself.
Right. Or else you feel like you're going crazy. I mean, I remember it. I'm like, I'm a stress relief expert. I've, written this great book and I'm crying every night. Like, I had to remember you're going through a miscarriage, like,
Absolutely. My God.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I share that story because always have to remind myself, and I think we always have to remind each other to be more compassionate towards ourselves and easy to ourselves. It's so easy for me to tell a friend, be easy on yourself. You're going through a miscarriage. Be easy on yourself. This has been a long journey. But when it comes to yourself, it's like, it's so much harder to take that advice.
It is. Yeah.
And that's why I feel like you have to have outside support. That's why you have to build, whether it's like using your courses or using the tapping meditations or just reaching out to friends, but you have to have like your go-tos that are outside of you,
Yeah.
of things that can hold your hand during that time.
Absolutely. I love the book, The Untethered Soul. Have you read that? I'm sure you've
I've
read that,
heard
right?
of it, but I didn't read it. Tell
It's
me about it.
so good. It's amazing. And it actually, what he talks about, very similar to Eckhart Tolle.
Yeah.
Except I know that I get Eckhart Tolle, but not all my friends do. Like, not a lot of people understand what he's saying because he seems abstract, but I think that he's very like clear.
Yeah.
Almost too easy clear, and that people
I
like
get it.
overthink.
Yeah.
But the way that this author with the Untethered Soul that wrote the Untethered Soul, he explains it as that we have emotional blocks because our tendency as humans is to not want to feel bad emotions. We
Yeah.
resist it. That's our initial reaction, is to resist it. So what happens when we resist? We tense up. And what happens when we tense up? We actually keep the blocks in place
What
rather
you
than just
resist persists.
allowing them. Yes. And rather than just allowing them and leaning into them and giving them a voice and allowing them the space to be. And it's okay. Like, it's okay. I'm sad right now. Let me just allow this feeling to move through my body the way it wants to.
Yeah.
Ultimately. So I find what you're giving an actual technique to do that.
That's exactly what it is. And because one of the challenges is sometimes it's tricky, right? Like sometimes we can have a good cry and we feel like we can move past something, like just the fact of having that cry and having that experience.
Mm-hmm.
Other times, we're angry about something and it's just this loop in our head and we're just having trouble really getting it out. Like, we're saying it. Now, what's amazing about the tapping is you're claiming how you feel, you're leaning into it, but because you're stimulating these acupressure points that relax your body, it's creating the safe space for that feeling.
Mm-hmm.
So you're able to begin to feel that feeling without having that tightness in your body that you're talking about, without kind of that restriction.
Yeah.
So by relaxing your body, you can have a real honest conversation with how you're feeling. And then, again and again, we see people saying, oh, I can finally relax. I can finally sleep better. And what's amazing about the app is, and in tapping in general, what I like about it is that you measure in the beginning. You always say 0 to 10, how anxious do I feel? How angry do I feel? And you measure the intensity so that when you finish tapping, you can check in and go, oh, in just 2 minutes, I moved 5 points. It's down by half or by 2 or whatever it is.
And I love that about the app because it measures, it asks you, prompts you to give a number before you can move on.
Exactly.
And then afterwards too. I think it's great.
Yeah, I think it's personally empowering to see, oh, it's better. I also find that sometimes, I've worked with someone, they've been so angry and then they tap and they feel relaxed and they go, you know what, but I wasn't even that angry to begin with. And I'm like, Are you kidding me? Like, there was steam coming out of your ears. So I also like that, like, you can kind of really see the difference. But what's been cool on like my side of being the creator of the app, which was not an intention. Like, we put the 0 to 10 because that's what you do with tapping. And we liked to, to keep track of people's progress. But now in the back end, we can see, 260,000 people used the releasing anxiety tapping meditation. And the average decrease was 41% in 9 minutes.
Wow. So
Like,
you can see all of those statistics
right.
because of
Like
the
we
app.
can't see who's getting what results because that we've coded it so it's completely private, but we can see the data coming in. And so we can
Right. So you
see
almost have like a huge study.
it's like become a huge study. Yeah. And to that point, I mean, we've had universities reach out to us to say, hey, can we use this as a study? Because it's kind of like built in as a study. And that
That's
was,
amazing.
I wish I could say that was our brilliant plan all along, but that was just by accident. We just created the app and then realized, oh, wow, like we can also show people that this really works. We have the data, we have the numbers to prove that people are getting more
They
results.
should bring this into schools, like middle schools, when there's
Yeah,
like such difficulties and transitions.
we have a few things. So I live in Sandy Hook, Connecticut, where that school
Oh,
shooting
wow.
happened in
Yes.
the elementary school. When that happened, we began to use tapping with just members of the community. Everybody was grieving. And through that work, we met Scarlett Lewis, who lost her son, Jesse. And at that time, obviously, I mean, this is a mother who's just in grief, but also
Yeah.
there's shock and there is anger and there's a lot to process. And so she began to use tapping on the anger that she felt. And she felt such a shift where she felt like she was able to grieve her son in a better way. And she also began to tap on different things that had impacted her, like when the school shooting happened, there were helicopters from the news station. So those news helicopters, and just, we live in a small town. We don't really have a lot of helicopters here. So anytime she saw a helicopter, it would trigger that moment. Her body would go into that, like, it's not safe response. And so we did tapping, focusing on that. And we've worked with a lot of other members in our community who just had a tough time. It was a hard time for the whole community, for the whole country and the world. Since that time, this woman, Scarlett, this amazing mom, has created this program about emotional intelligence in
Oh,
school.
wow. Wow. That's
And it
amazing.
is all over the country. And tapping is one of the modalities that she shares.
That's
So we
incredible.
have, there's many schools around the world that do tapping with kids in the morning before school begins. And even recently, we've added tapping meditations in our app that are for kids focused on the coronavirus and separated by age, because how you tap with a 5-year-old is very different than how you tap with a 13-year-old.
Right.
But creating these tapping meditations, these experiences where kids have a moment to express how they feel. And,
Yeah.
for a 5-year-old, they might not say, even though I'm upset, I accept how I feel, but they can say, even though I'm mad, I'm still a good kid.
Right.
And coming from that place of just learning to lean into your emotions, like you say, and know that even if you're feeling things, you're still a good person.
Right.
And that's been incredible. So yeah, we have a lot of great success with kids.
It's amazing. Because I remember hearing, like, the first one was the first time I heard about it. I deeply and completely love and accept
Love and
myself,
accept myself.
which is, like like you've mentioned before, is just you push these feelings away because you feel inadequate because of those feelings, or you feel like you don't deserve to feel those feelings. So it's such a huge important aspect of it, is really to accept yourself regardless of what's happening, and that you are not your emotion.
Yeah. And to put some context around this, when you start tapping, you always start on the side of the hand and you say the setup statement. And the setup statement sets you up for the process. And it's a moment of just saying, even though this is how I feel, I accept these feelings, or I'm okay. It's a moment of acceptance so that we can also have an honest conversation with ourselves as we begin to tap. We're saying, okay, I'm okay. This is how I feel. So let me just have a process where I express that. So you say that 3 times, and you can say, again, even though I'm frustrated, I accept how I feel. Or some people say, I love and accept myself. I love and accept myself is such a powerful phrase. I know, Michelle, for some reason, it's a very hard phrase to
Mm-hmm.
say. So
Yeah.
sometimes kind of the bridge, the step one is simply to say, I accept how I feel.
Right.
and then we can move towards, then I just see organically people move towards more self-love and more self-acceptance when they start by just saying, I just accept where I am and how I'm feeling.
Right. I remember the Louise Hay exercise that she always mentions is to say, I love you when you look at the mirror. I still can't get myself to do that fully.
You know, it's,
That's
yeah,
difficult.
it's so interesting how that is. And that's why I think having a technique where we're creating a space where we are giving ourselves a moment to accept ourselves is important. Because if you
Yeah.
just think, oh, my life would be better if I accept myself, well, how does that even happen?
Right.
Right? Like, it's very
Yeah.
hard for that to just naturally happen, you know, in this day and age with everything going on. So it's nice to have a practice where you give yourself that space.
Yeah, and I love the fact that you guys did have quarantine ones, or stress or anxiety related to COVID, and you offer that for free.
Thank you. Yeah, we have a whole section that's anything that's related to the coronavirus, including panic attacks, the anxiety tapping meditation. I mean, we have a lot that's free, and everything for the kids around COVID is also free. And it's nice. You know, we live in a time where so much is out of our control,
Hmm.
and it's been really nice to feel like with the app that I'm able to give back when, again, so much is out of our control. So it's nice to be able to teach this and to provide this service. And if you're a healthcare provider, a mental health worker, a teacher,
Hmm.
you can get a free membership to the app, which unlocks the entire library. There's
That's
so much
amazing.
in the Tapping Solution app that, like, even if you don't get a premium membership, you can get a lot of value. But if you're someone who's serving our community during this crazy time, we're giving out free memberships. And I can give you that link if you want to put it in the show
Yes,
notes or wherever this
I'll put it in the
goes.
show notes. That is so beautiful. I thank you for that. That's amazing. That's a huge gift for so many people, deserving people that are taking their time and energy into serving the community.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, this virus impacts our minds way more before it impacts our bodies.
it sure
And
does.
yeah,
There's a lot of fear around it. It's the complete unknown, because like think about fear. We fear the unknown. We fear death. It brings up so many triggers because of everything. It stops us from like moving on. It gives us a fear of losing money. We've had so much fear and anxiety from this on so
yeah.
many levels, really on all fronts.
Yeah, definitely. And you know what I mentioned before about how when you release stress, you can think clearly. Talk about a moment in history when we need to think clearly. I mean, talk
Yeah.
about a moment when we need to be resourceful and innovative and think differently. Like, now this is it, because the landscape has changed. And so the moments when stress is such an easy experience to have, or the moments when we have to say, okay, I have to commit to a practice to
Hmm.
relieve this anxiety, because now more than ever, I need the resources to navigate this and find my way through it.
Absolutely. And also, can you share information about your book?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a few books with a tapping solution.
Hmm.
The very first book is called The Tapping Solution. That's by my brother, Nick Ortner. And then I have two books. My first book was The Tapping Solution for Weight Loss and Body Confidence. This is a book for women. It's a woman's guide to stress less and weigh less. And it's not really about the weight, to be honest. It is about the relationship that we have with ourselves and why it's often so hard to deal with cravings, and to make lifestyle changes when we're under so much stress.
Hmm.
And then my next book is called The Tapping Solution to Create Lasting Change. Taking that same concept of weight loss, why is change so hard for so
Yep.
many of us? And it's often because we are trying to force ourselves and push ourselves to change. And if things aren't pleasurable, they're not sustainable. So if
Mhm.
we can't look at the resistance as to why certain things are so hard and clear the resistance, then we're not going to have the lasting change. We're not going to be able to be consistent. I mean, my whole passion is to allow your heart to know it's safe to change. That if you can feel like it's safe to do something, if you can look at those blocks and that resistance, then taking action, it becomes so much easier. And
Mhm.
that's what we need. We don't need more willpower. We need more ease.
That's right. That's so true. And feeling safe, it's such a good point that you mentioned, because a lot of us don't feel safe when we have like major changes. And some people get too hard on themselves, like you said earlier, and that just, it's an uphill battle. I mean, you're basically setting yourself up for failure.
Yeah, exactly. And hey, I've done it. I can write these books because
We've all
I've been
done
there.
it. Yeah, we've all done it. I've done it. I do it all the time. I still do it, even though I
Yeah.
know better.
I have to catch myself.
Yeah.
Totally.
So can you tell the audience about your app and how they can sign up and find
Yeah,
out?
yes, thank you. So it's called the Tapping Solution app, and you can find it on Google Play for Android or your App Store. It's a free download. And like I mentioned, we have a lot of free things. You can learn how to do the tapping. It's such an easy share. If you have someone in your life who is really stressed out, it's an easy thing to send to them. I know I mentioned that because I know so many people who love tapping, but they're like, how do I get my sister to tap? How do I get my friend to tap? And they're all saying, oh, this app is great because it's such an easy introduction. So it's the Tapping Solution app.
And there's a lot of free ones, as you mentioned before, which is great. It's a great place to start. And then if you want to get more into detail, I mean, there's certain ones that you sell individually. And then where can people find you or more information about you, like your website? I'll have all of
Yeah.
this, by the way, on the episode notes.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you. So it's thetappingsolution.com. We just redid our homepage to feature some of the great studies. So if you want to learn more about the research and just more about tapping, that's a great place to go. And then to connect with me, you can find me on Facebook under Jessica Ortner, and the same thing on Instagram at Jessica Ortner. We try to share a lot of information about tapping and just and also my cute 18-month-old gets into my
He's so
Instagram.
cute. I love watching all the great pictures that you post, and he's adorable. I actually really enjoyed the fork episode, or the fork
Oh
story
yeah.
with your
Yeah, I have
grandmother.
it. Do you want me, should I end with
Yes,
this quick
yes. I
story?
love it. Yes.
So I have it on my desk.
This is great.
so, so I had shared this story, and it's interesting that you bring it up because it hit 2 million views on Facebook. I mean, it just went absolutely
I'm
viral.
honestly not surprised. It was so inspiring, and it was right around the epidemic or
It
pandemic.
was right
Yeah.
when it started. So the story that I shared was I had heard that my friend was tested positive with the coronavirus, and I found myself running downstairs to grab this fork. So I shared that my grandmother was born in England but moved to Argentina when she was 5. And so when war broke out, she got on a boat and she went back to England. Now, when I used to go to Argentina to visit her, I would sit in her living room and just ask her these stories about World War II. I wanted to know everything. I was just fascinated. And she was very honest with a 9-year-old. You know, she told me about going with the love of her life, and when she stopped getting letters from Ram, this boy that she loved, she stormed into an officer's office to find out if he was alive or not. And at that time, you couldn't find out if someone had died or not, because the only way to find out was through their parents, because the Army or the Royal Air Force would send a letter to their parents. But Graham was from an English family in Argentina, and so his parents were in Argentina. And remember, they would communicate with letters, and ships weren't going back and forth at that time. So she would just told me the story about storming in and asking if he was alive, and finding out that he had died. And she would just be honest about the heartbreak that she experienced during the war. But then she would also talk about how she created some of the most amazing friendships of her life, and some of just the most joyous moments in her life were also during the war. And she told me this story about this fork. The Royal Air Force, when you enlisted, they would give you one fork and one knife, and you would carry it with you everywhere. And when it was time to eat, you would use them, and then you would wash them and put them back into your little carrier case and go back off to work. Well, she had a meeting and she left her bag outside of the door. And when she left the meeting, her perfectly fine fork was gone, and in its place was this really bent fork. And people would tease her. You know, she would eat and they would always make fun of her fork, and she would make jokes about her bent fork. And I remember her laughing and talking about how even as an 80-year-old, she missed her fork. And it really surprised me how through all of this, through losing people that she loved and just through such a horrible time, she had these moments of joy, these moments of silliness. And so when she passed away, I called my aunt and I said, Aunt Penny, the only thing I want is this fork. There is a twisted fork in a back room. If you can find it, that's all I want. And she found it and she sent it to me. And here I have it on my desk. And for me, it's just a reminder of resiliency, of how we can be going through really hard times and really uncertain times and still find moments to laugh at a fork and still find moments to connect with friends and to build those relationships. And right now, with so much uncertainty, we have to tap into the power of our ancestors. I mean, if we are alive, anyone who's watching this comes from powerful ancestors. I mean, just the mere fact that we are alive means that our ancestors were survivors. And so it's amazing to look at their stories, and especially since, you know, our ancestors, for most of us, didn't have it easy and life was always uncertain and they didn't have the luxuries that we have now. And tapping into their strength and their courage and their stories really can help us navigate this new time when so much feels uncertain. So yes, I shared that story and I keep this little fork on my desk as a reminder.
I love it. I really enjoy that story. I just love the fact that it's something, it's a symbol that you have of strength and you have it next to you. And I love the fact that you honor your ancestors so much and your grandmother. You honor her story and you're sharing it on. I think that that is something all of us could really, it's such a resource of strength that we can all have, but yet also honor those who have left before us.
Yeah.
So,
And
you
I
know,
do feel like, you know, I have that grandmother and I have powerful women on both sides. Like I have my mother. I was born in Argentina and, you know, I had my abuela and just I tap into them, like especially the women in my family. Like, I really connect with them. Anytime I have to go on stage and I'm like really nervous, I call them in. Like the moment before I go on stage, every time I just think of them and I just think, give me courage, help me speak from my heart, guide me through this. And I feel them. I really feel like they're guiding me. And I think all of us can do that. Sometimes we just forget to ask. We forget to connect.
yeah, I have my grandmother's pearl ring, and I carry it with me everywhere. And it's getting a little damaged, but I just don't want to take it off. But I totally understand what you're saying about tapping into their strength. I mean, I really feel them, and I think that we don't. What we know as reality is probably like 1% of what's really happening. So
Yeah.
we can, you know, our intuition and our feeling. There's so much more. So I really do believe they're with us.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And especially like if you're going through like uncertainty, just struggling with fertility, there's so much uncertainty.
Yeah.
And I remember when I was struggling with my miscarriages, I was really looking at like how do I support my body? So like what are the things I can control?
Right.
But then the other thought that helped me find peace was realizing that there was this other soul that wanted to come through me and that he or she was going to come when they're ready, that it wasn't just up to me, that there was something more divine about this. And I look at my baby now and it feels right, right? Like it
Mm.
all feels right. Like him being born when he was born feels right. And who he is
Yeah.
now feels right. And, you know, you look back and I know obviously it's easier having a child and looking back at your miscarriages with gratitude. It's very, very hard to be in that place when you don't have the baby you want yet. But for
Yeah.
me, before I had him, I began to envision what it would feel like, that feeling of it being right and that faith that I'm going to do what I can control, but there is another soul on the other side, and he or she is also deciding. And so we're going to work together, and
Yes.
I'm also going to have faith in their decision. And
That's a
that was
really
an
profound insight that is really hard to see when you're in the journey. But
so
I think
hard.
it's really profound that you were actually able to see that, hey, you know, there's two aspects or three, really. It's us, them, and the universe.
Yeah, exactly. And it is hard in those moments, but I made an effort to go there to, you know, whether it was just taking a bath and closing my eyes and just envisioning that. Like I worked on that. I worked on that image. And
Yeah.
I remember talking to someone. I'm only going to share this here because I feel like your community will get it. My friend introduced me to it was the medical the medical medium. I don't know if you've
Yes.
ever heard of him,
Yes.
Anthony Williams. So I got to meet him because we have the same publisher. When I was struggling with my miscarriages, I was able to connect with him, and I said to him, like, what's wrong with my body? Like, what? Because that was my assumption. I had 2 miscarriages. There's something wrong with my body. And he was like, I don't sense that there's anything wrong, but I can't tell you, this is out of my control. There is something else on the other side that is bigger than all of us. And you just have to have faith that that baby is going to decide, and know that you're healthy and that you're fine. And that to me was incredibly comforting. And sometimes I had the privilege of having him hear that, sometimes having him say that to me. I know other people don't, or just don't believe it, but I do think there's something powerful, even just within yourself, to be open to that idea and notice if it feels good. And if it feels good, then it's right for you, and it's something to really hold on to.
That's amazing. I mean, I got the chills a couple of times, and I usually get the chills when something's very aligned because it's very involuntary. I do want to share actually something very personal. I when I first married my husband, I had a chemical pregnancy, so it was similar. Just right away, I got my period. But before, when I saw that that it was positive, for some reason I couldn't stop crying. I was just crying like crazy. I don't know what it was. It just like something overtook me, and I didn't know what I was feeling, but maybe like deep down I knew it wasn't it.
Yeah.
And I fell asleep after crying. It was my husband came home from work because he worked overnight and he was doing his residency. And I remember crying to him like crazy, then finally falling asleep and having a dream. So I have brown hair and brown eyes, obviously, as you can see. And my husband has brown hair and green eyes, kind of like hazel eyes, similar to yours. So in my dream, I see a blonde girl with really, really long hair sitting on top of a washing machine. But what's interesting is you think about the cycles. She's sitting over something that is cyclical,
Yeah.
and she's telling me, hey, she's kind of like playful with her legs up and down and saying, you know what, I'm going to go and I'm going to come back. And I woke up and I got my period. And then my first pregnancy was my older daughter, who has brown hair and brown eyes. And I completely forgot about this. My second pregnancy, I have a blonde hair, blue eyed girl that eventually had long hair. And I remember mentioning to my husband and my mom saying, was it my imagination, or did I describe somebody like my daughter? And so they said, no, I remember you telling me this dream. And then I told my daughter finally when she was a little old enough, and she had an immediate visceral reaction. She just immediately cried and ran to me and hugged me. And it was so eye-opening. And I don't believe in accidents. I'm working in this field for a reason. I feel very called to. I really connect with the whole fertility thing because I was also saved from fertility issues beforehand. I had issues with my period, but that's a whole other story. But I do believe that things happen for a reason. And it was such a lesson in understanding, just a little insight, because we don't see from our vantage point as humans everything that the universe obviously sees for us. So sometimes, though, we do get these little spurts and these little moments of awakening where we see something or we're given information. And I do believe that that was when I realized that the soul's involved 100%.
Yes. Yeah. It's not just us.
Yeah.
And I think that's like an empowering thought. I mean, at first it can be like, but I want to control, like
Yeah.
we want to just say, like, I want to get pregnant now. I want to have full control.
Yeah.
But to me, I took that as, okay, I don't have to be so hard on myself because it's not
Exactly.
all me. I don't have to feel like a failure because maybe I'm not failing anyone. Maybe I'm
That's right.
doing exactly and experiencing exactly what I'm meant to be experiencing.
Exactly. And that is really the big lesson. Is we always say this, you are not broken. Nobody's broken. There's no such thing as being broken. It's a mind, it's how we perceive it, but it's not really based in truth.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all about alignment, and somehow it works out the way the universe wants it to. Unfortunately, we don't know.
Yeah.
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 But I just want to say thank you so much for coming on. It was such a pleasure. I keep talking to you for like hours because we have so many good, interesting conversations. But I really want to thank you so much for coming on. I think that what you do is amazing and so empowering. And I love the app personally. And thank you so much for allowing me to actually to have access and get to see all of them. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me.